It was my grandson Leo's 6th birthday, and the house was bursting at the seams. Children tore through the living room like tiny whirlwinds, shrieking with delight, laughter echoing off the walls. Wrapping paper crinkled underfoot as gifts were torn open with eager fingers. The buttery sweetness of vanilla frosting mingled with the din of pop music and the thundering of little feet. It was chaos, the happy, wild kind. My daughter Rachel and her husband Thomas knelt beside Leo, who stood triumphantly in the middle of it all, wearing a plastic night costume from the supermarket. Head to toe in silver-colored nylon, he brandished a flimsy sword like he'd just won a battle for the kingdom of the backyard. My husband Gerald was slouched into the corner of the couch, a soft grin on his face, waving a toy in front of Leo to mimic clashing monsters and swooshing dragons. The little boy giggled, triumphant and pleased. As for me, I was in the kitchen. Behind the closed kitchen door, the stovetop hissed and steamed in protest. I moved with urgency, gliding from counter to sink to oven, like a waitress at the peak of a Saturday night dinner rush. My hands chopped and stirred with mechanical precision. Dough needed kneading. Beans needed tasting. Oven timers ticked like landmines. The kitchen door stayed shut, thick and soundproof. On the other side, I could only hear muffled bursts of laughter. No words, just a wall of joy. I wasn't really part of. "Mom," Rachel called from the living room, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "Don't forget Leo's favorite vanilla pudding. And hey," she added, without skipping a beat, "I brought back soybeans from Charleston. Can you use them in your baked beans and beef dish? God, I haven't had that in ages. Oh, and could you make a chicken pot pie too? Yours is better than anything I've had in a restaurant." I smiled faintly, but it didn't reach my eyes. It was the kind of smile you wear when no one's looking closely. Every request came with layers of work. Hours of marinating, slow roasting, chopping, rolling dough from scratch. These weren't just meals. They were projects. Trials. A labor of invisible love. I sighed, wiped my hands on a towel and stepped to the door. "Gerald," I called out, "I've got too much going on in here. Can you come rinse this cut of meat for me?" The laughter continued, uninterrupted. No answer. I called again, louder. Still nothing. I waited a moment, then gave up. Silence. Again. Always silence when I asked for help. Rolling up my sleeves, I returned to the cutting board. My hands worked faster now, more from tension than urgency. 3 hours later, the kitchen looked like a battlefield. Oil had spattered on the floor in constellations. Dirty pots towered in the sink like ruins. My hands were red and sore from endless chopping, and even my back refused to straighten. But before calling everyone to the table, I paused at the kitchen doorway. I smoothed my apron and practiced a smile. I had news. Something small, something mine. A spark. That morning, just for fun, I'd picked up a $2 scratch-off ticket at the corner gas station. I hadn't planned on it. It was Leo's birthday, and I thought, why not? Maybe something lucky will happen today. Later, as the stew simmered and the house buzzed behind me, I scratched it while leaning against the counter, and then I froze. $10,000. I stared. Scanned it again. 3 times. I checked the Colorado State Lotto website twice, convinced it had to be a mistake, a misprint, a cruel joke. But it wasn't. It was real. $10,000 from a $2 scratcher. My mind spun, and something fluttered in my chest. Something that hadn't stirred in a long, long time. Hope, maybe. Or relief. I didn't tell anyone right away. I wanted to announce it at dinner, make it a surprise, a joyful moment for the whole family. I'd share the winnings, get Leo a bigger birthday gift, maybe tuck some away, and just maybe something for me too. But then Leo burst through the kitchen door, his face twisted into an angry little knot. "You didn't bring out the cake," he snapped. "I don't want your food anymore." Before I could react, he grabbed a full cup of soda from the counter and threw it. Maybe he didn't mean to hit me, but he did. The sticky liquid hit my chest with a cold slap, soaking through my shirt. I gasped, stumbling backward, my spine hitting the cabinet. The plastic cup hit the tile and shattered into pieces. Before I could say a word, Gerald's voice rang out from the living room. "Oh, come on, he's just a kid. Don't make a scene." I stood there, drenched and stunned, palms burning from the shock. No one came in. No one. They were still out there, eating cake, scrolling through their phones, as if I didn't exist. And that's when it happened. That flicker, that small, persistent flame inside me, quietly died, like someone had yanked the cord from a lamp. No more light, no more pretending. I forced myself to breathe, swallowed the sting building in my throat, and walked back to the stove. There were dishes still to finish. My hands moved like machines. I plated the final one, smoothed my apron, steeled myself. Now maybe, I thought, maybe now I'll share the news. I opened the kitchen door and stepped into the dining room. But then, I froze. Sitting beside Gerald was a woman I hadn't seen in decades, elegantly dressed, with perfect posture and a smile that seemed to know exactly where it belonged. Her eyes scanned the table like she'd sat there 100 times before. She turned her head and offered me a soft, familiar greeting. "Hi, Elaine." It took a moment to register. Evelyn Marks. In school, Gerald had adored her. He wrote her notes, sketched her face in the margins of his notebooks. His first love, the girl he'd never quite let go. And now she was sitting in my dining room. My throat tightened. I opened my mouth to return the greeting, to at least maintain appearances, but Gerald beat me to it. His voice cut across the room, sharp and impatient. "What took you so long? People are starving. What the hell were you doing in there?" The words slapped me clean across the face. Not a hello, not a thank you, just a reprimand, public and casual, as if I were an employee late to her shift, as if the 3 hours I'd just spent sweating over handmade dishes had been some personal inconvenience to him. He turned to Evelyn, lifted a rib from the platter, and placed it gently on her plate. Then he smiled, a kind of soft, almost boyish smile I hadn't seen in years. "Try this, Evelyn. She's not great at much, but I'll give her this. She knows how to cook." And just like that, something snapped. Not with rage, not even grief, just a quiet, frozen kind of knowing. I felt like I'd slipped into an alternate version of my life where I was the outsider, an invisible character in someone else's family portrait. Before I could find the words to respond, Leo stood up and shouted Grandma was sneaking food in the kitchen. "That's why I'm starved." Rachel let out a laugh. "Oh, really? And how do you know that, baby?" Leo puffed up with pride. "I saw her. She was eating by herself. She didn't give me any." My fingers tightened around the tablecloth. I hadn't had a single bite all day. The pudding had to be chilled just right. The beans simmered for hours. The pot pie crust folded and baked from scratch. But to them, I was just the selfish one. The one sneaking food and avoiding family fun. What hurt wasn't the accusation. It was the lie. Leo had started lying. He was learning how to play the room, to spin stories for applause. I bit back the ache in my throat. "Leo, sweetie," I said gently. "Grandma didn't sneak any food. That's not true. I was in the kitchen because some dishes." Before I could finish, Gerald slammed his hand down on the table. His chair scraped loudly as he stood up. "Are you serious right now? He's 6. You're really picking a fight with a child." He glared at me, the way someone glares at a waitress who's brought the wrong order. I looked around the table hoping for anyone to say something, but all I were blank stares, avoidant eyes. Rachel rose and came over to pat Leo's back with forced tenderness. "He's just 6, Mom. He doesn't know any better." She looked at me like I was losing my grip, like I was unstable. Leo, seizing the shift in tone, let out a dramatic sob and ran directly into Evelyn's waiting arm. She didn't even hesitate, just wrapped him in a gentle embrace and murmured into his hair, "Oh, Leo, don't cry. Don't be sad. Grandma Evelyn's right here, sweetheart." She said it so smoothly, so comfortably, it made my skin crawl. My fingernails dug into my palm. I stood frozen, shoulders locked so tightly it felt like I couldn't breathe. I opened my mouth, tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. My throat closed up. I looked around the room, familiar faces, every one of them, yet not a single person looked like home anymore. They felt like strangers at a play I hadn't been invited to perform in. And then Leo looked up from Evelyn's arms, and between sniffles, shouted loud enough for everyone to hear. I don't want Grandma anymore. I want Grandma Evelyn. She's nicer. I stared, stunned. My lips parted in disbelief, but I turned away just in time to catch it, a flicker of something across Evelyn's face. A twitch. Barely there, but real. Not kindness, not pity. Triumph. She cradled Leo closer. Oh, baby. She cooed. We'll stay with Grandma Evelyn from now on, okay? Rachel, standing beside them with a wide, cheerful grin, joined in. Yeah, Leo, let's not upset Grandma anymore. We don't want her to be sad, right? The room spun slightly. Everything was wrong. The lighting, the smell. Even the framed family photos on the wall seemed to smirk at me, like they'd been mocking me all along. Every birthday cake I'd baked, every shirt I'd mended, every late-night dinner, just memories now burned into nothing. Evelyn, eat before it gets cold, Gerald said, motioning to the dish in front of her. He'd already lifted Leo into his arms, pulling out the chair beside him with a care I hadn't seen in years. Calm down, Leo, he whispered. Let Grandma Evelyn enjoy her meal. I sat at the far end of the table, silent, but I think my face said everything. Gerald scowled, then slammed his chopsticks on the table. What now? He snapped. You're going to ruin Leo's birthday with that look? It's depressing. Rachel jumped in. Mom, could you know it's his birthday? Do you really need to make everyone miserable? Thomas chimed in from his seat, his voice cold and flat. You're here to see your grandson, not star in a soap opera. Bad grandma, Leo muttered, just loud enough, and that's when it finally landed. This wasn't a birthday. This wasn't a gathering. It was a performance, and I was the character they'd written out of the script a long time ago. I sat still for one final breath, and in that breath, something broke loose. Something invisible, heavy, and old. Gerald, I said, my voice low and even. Let's get a divorce. The words left my mouth like an arrow, silent, direct, undeniable. For one full second, the dining room froze. Forks midair, mouths slightly agape, eyes wide and unblinking. The kind of stillness that doesn't belong at a birthday party, or a dinner table, or in any place where someone still thinks everything is fine. Gerald was the first to react. He let out a low scoff, leaned back in his chair, and shook his head with a crooked smirk. Elaine, he said, almost condescendingly, you're 67. You think you're still in your Uris or something. Then he curled his lips into a sneer, and added, you say stuff like that and expect what? Sympathy? Newsflash? No one cares if you want a divorce at your age. People will just laugh. I turned and looked at him. His hand was resting casually on Evelyn's thigh now, like it belonged there. He didn't flinch when I caught him, didn't even pretend to be ashamed. And I realized he wasn't embarrassed, not even a little. I took a slow, deliberate breath and said, evenly, if none of you are ashamed, then why should I be? His smirk faltered. He stood up fast, his chair screeching across the floor like it was trying to run from the moment. Cut the drama, he snapped, lowering his voice but filling it with edge. It's Leo's birthday. I'm not about to fight with you right now. I stared at him, dry and detached, like I was watching a play from the back row. And it occurred to me, I wasn't causing drama. I was just the one finally refusing to sit quietly in it. I got up slowly, steadying myself with the edge of the table. My back still ached from the day's cooking, but I stood tall. I'd gotten up at 7 in the morning, cooked 8 dishes, washed 4 pots, and somehow I was the one being scolded for taking too long, for spoiling the mood, for not smiling enough while getting erased. Leo had lied about me sneaking food, and not a single person at that table stood up for me. Not one. This was never my home. Not in the ways that mattered. 40 years of marriage had left me invisible enough to replace insult or simply ignore. Mom? Rachel said, her voice sharp now. Do you really have to do this today? Evelyn is here. Leo's upset. Can't you just... Thomas stepped beside her, his arms crossed loosely, but his tone was anything but casual. We came to celebrate, he said, not to watch you unravel. Leo, still sniffling in Evelyn's lap, looked at me through watery eyes. I didn't lie, he mumbled. I really did. Evelyn leaned in protectively, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Leo didn't do anything wrong, she said in that soft, practiced tone. He's a sweet boy. Let's not blame him for things he doesn't understand. Something inside me tightened. My hands clenched before I even realized it, and as I moved away from the table, my elbow bumped the edge. A stack of plates teetered, then crashed to the floor, shattering in a chorus of sharp, clean breaks. The sound pierced through the room like a scream no one had dared to make. I inhaled sharply. The heat rising in my chest burned hotter than the coffee Leo had thrown earlier. But my voice, when it came, was loud, clear, and even. Why? I asked the room. Why is it always memed? No one answered. I didn't expect them to. I cook. I clean. I plan your holidays. And still you sit there and act like I'm the burdened, like I'm ruining your fun. My voice rose, not in rage but in power. The kind of power that comes from a woman who's finally realized she's been drowning in silence for too long. I haven't even eaten today, I said. So guess what? Neither will you. Leo's little face went pale. He immediately scrambled back into Evelyn's arms like a reflex. Rachel and Thomas stared at me, frozen, like they were seeing something they'd never allowed themselves to see before. Maybe they were. Maybe I'd never let them. I'd always been the calm one. The pleasant one. The yes mother. The silent sacrifice. But not anymore. I turned to Gerald. My voice didn't shake this time. Listen carefully, Gerald. I'm not joking. I'm done. I want a divorce. He stood there, jaw clenched so tight his face throbbed red. His teeth ground together with a sound like gravel. What the hell is wrong with you? He growled. You need to calm down. You just ruined the entire evening. He pointed at the shattered plates on the floor. Clean that up. I didn't move. My spine straightened like something steely had been forged inside it. No, I said. You all have hands. Fee, if you want it clean, you clean it. The tension in the room pulled taut, like a wire stretched to its snapping point. Without waiting, I turned and walked toward the front door. My fingers touched the handle just as I heard the fast, desperate patter of little feet behind me. Graham, don't go. I turned. Pure instinct. Leo was running toward me, clutching a mug of hot chocolate, half full, trembling in his small hands. The one Evelyn had given him earlier. He ran too fast. His foot snagged on the edge of the rug. The cup jolted forward. The drink splashed across my chest, near boiling, sweet and thick. It soaked through my clothes, burning skin, clinging like shame. I gasped. The shock stopped me mid-step. My heel slipped, and I fell hard onto the floor, near the door. Everything stopped. No sound, no reaction. Then Leo began to cry. Loud, shrill, ear-splitting. Bad grandma, he sobbed. I'm not letting you leave. You don't love me anymore. His mug rolled to a stop by my side. A puddle of chocolate spreading across the floor. I tried to sit up, bracing my hand against the floor, but brushed against Leo's ankle. He stumbled backward and fell beside me, still sobbing. Rachel rushed over, scooping him up with a quick, sharp movement. She looked down at me with something that felt less like worry and more like contempt. Mom, she said, he's just a kid. Was all this really necessary? You flipped out, Rachel continued, her voice rising as she adjusted Leo on her hip. You flipped the table, scared him into falling, and now he's got a bruise on his leg. I blinked in disbelief. The floor beneath me felt cold, my chest sticky and burning. The humiliation wasn't just in the fall or the spill, it was in her eyes. She wasn't asking if I was okay. She was blaming me. Again. You really think he threw that drink on you? She scoffed. You stormed off in a tantrum, and he panicked. What did you expect him to do? My throat tightened. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Evelyn approached calmly, crouching down beside Leo with a practiced kind of grace. She wrapped him in a soft hug and whispered to him like she'd been rehearsing this her whole life. It's okay, sweetheart. Let's get you changed. All right. This afternoon we'll go pick out those superhero Legos you love. You've been such a brave boy. She dabbed his face with tissues and smiled at him, all gentle and glowing, like a new porcelain figurine added to the family shelf. I just sat there on the floor, burning, wet, humiliated like some prop no one wanted to claim. It wasn't the scalding chocolate that hurt anymore. It wasn't even the fall. It was the clarity, the deep, sharp knowing that this place, this table, this house, these people, had never truly made space for me. I got to my feet slowly, the burn on my chest still throbbing. My voice was calm, strangely calm. You know what, I said. I'm actually glad I'd already made my decision before this circus. Gerald turned around sharply, his irritation leaking out like smoke. Elaine, he barked, have you lost your mind? Saying things like that in front of a child? What the hell are you trying to do, traumatize him? I glanced at Rachel, at Thomas, at Evelyn, all standing off to the side. None of them looked shocked, just vaguely uncomfortable, like I was a guest who'd overstayed. Evelyn frowned. Elaine, I know you're Leo's grandmother, but you really can't take everything so personally. He's 6, he doesn't know what he's saying. I looked around again at the broken mug, the cold food, the half-eaten cake, and something inside me broke clean, not in a shattering way, but in a way that carved clarity through the fog. Should I be apologizing? I asked, voice steady. For what? For not smiling through one more meal. For not pretending this family is still a family. No one responded. I wasn't yelling. I said softly. But none of you ever actually listen unless I do. I turned to Evelyn, met her eyes, squarely. Your husband just died. What was it? 6 weeks ago. And here you are, sitting at my table, hugging my grandson like you were born to it. You're not embarrassed? Then I'll be embarrassed for you. Her smile flickered briefly. Her lips parted to reply, but Gerald grabbed her wrist gently, a warning in the gesture. I didn't wait for her comeback. I'm going to change, I said, walking toward the stairs. There's an Uber coming to pick me up soon. And then, just loud enough for all of them to hear, I added, this house? Enjoy it. I'm done. I didn't look back, but I heard Gerald rise behind me, heard the angry thud of his wine glass slamming down on the table, the splash of red across the white linen like a wound. Who the hell do you think you're humiliating? He hissed. His voice was low, full of barely restrained rage. You dare talk to Evelyn like that? She's here for Leo's birthday, not to be your emotional punching bag. I heard his footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate. You're going to apologize to her right now. I turned slowly at the top of the stairs. His hand was lifting, slowly, mechanically, like even he didn't know what he planned to do with it. It hovered there in the air, trembling slightly. But I didn't flinch. I stood straight, chin lifted, eyes locked on his. Go ahead, I said, voice clear. Hit me. Might as well pay me back for 40 years in one swing. His face shifted, just a flicker of disbelief. His arm dropped to his side. The threat fizzled before it landed. He didn't strike me, but he lost. Not to me, but to the version of me he thought would never speak. I exhaled, long and slow. You want an apology? I said, voice soft. I won't give you one. Not for standing up, not for waking up. I swept my eyes across the room. Leo lied. Rachel blamed me. You mocked me. And Evelyn, you slid into a seat you didn't even ask permission to borrow. I stepped toward the entryway, pulled my coat from the hook, and reached for my wallet. Gerald barked, his voice sharp and performative. If you walk out that door, you won't have anywhere to go tonight. Where do you think you'll end up? You really believe someone else will put up with you? I smiled faintly. You're right. You've been so tolerant, letting another woman eat my food in my house while my grandson calls her grandma. Bravo. I reached for the doorknob. As I opened the door, a breeze swept in. Cool, crisp, almost like a blessing. The noise behind me dulled. Gerald shouted one last parting line as if I owed him an audience. She's gone. No family, no home. Let's see how long before she comes crawling back. I turned just once. My eyes met his, calm and unwavering. There's no need, I said. I'm not coming back. The door clicked shut behind me with a quiet final snap, and I walked forward into the street, into the night, into a future I didn't have to cook for. Outside, the air tasted different, cooler, thinner. My breath hitched on the breeze as I walked to the curb, chest aching from the scald and the silence that had wrapped around me for years. I unlocked my phone and opened the rideshare app. The screen glowed gently in the dim light, showing a driver just 4 minutes away. I slid into the back seat of a gray sedan and leaned against the window. The city rolled past in fragments, porch lights, hedges, children's toys on lawns. But for the first time in decades, I wasn't part of it. I wasn't the one preparing beds, or folding blankets, or checking the door locks. I wasn't the engine behind someone else's comfort. I was just riding, choosing, moving. I hadn't felt that free since I was a girl with a paper map and a dream of seeing mountains. We arrived at the hospital within 15 minutes. I walked in with my coat clutched around me, shirt still soaked through, skin beneath burning. The nurse at the intake desk raised her eyebrows when she saw me. "Ma'am, what happened?" "Hot chocolate. An accident," I murmured. She led me back to an exam room. A doctor in her 30s came in shortly after, straight-spined, no nonsense, hair pulled into a tight twist. She gave me one glance and frowned. "This is a pretty severe burn," she said. "Hot liquid? Do you want us to contact someone for you?" I hesitated, then gave a thin, tired smile. "No need. I live alone." The doctor looked like she wanted to say something else, but nodded and started preparing gauze and antiseptics. I lay back on the exam table and let her clean the wound. When the alcohol touched raw skin, I gasped. It was sharp, blistering, biting, but also strange, like it pulled something deeper out of me. Not just the pain from today, but from yesterday, and the 100 days before that. Years, decades. A dull heat I'd never let myself name. A cold draft from the ceiling vent swept across the gauze. It stung and soothed at once. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt something begin to heal. Not just skin, but something quieter, something older. Half an hour later, I stepped out into the dusky light, wrapped in bandage. The sky above Boulder had softened into evening, a delicate blend of plum and silver. I breathed it in like I hadn't in years. Across town, I'd found a small hotel on my phone, a historic inn with red shutters and creaky floors. $30 a night. Gerald would have scoffed. "Do you have no concept of money?" he'd say. "That's more than a week's groceries." But now I didn't hear his voice in my head anymore. I heard mine. The front desk clerk gave me a polite smile as I checked in. She didn't ask where I'd come from or why I had only one bag and a limp in my step. She just handed me the key. That night, I lay on a clean white mattress in a pair of soft, unfamiliar pajamas I'd picked up from the hotel lobby. The sheets smelled faintly of lavender detergent. The pillows were too many, but I loved them. And for the first time in my adult life, the quiet around me didn't feel threatening. It felt like peace. I reached for my phone and opened the browser. Getting divorced in your 60s, what now? The first result was a Reddit post titled, "My mom got divorced. That's when her life really began." I clicked it. The comments were endless. "Do it, ma'am. It's never too late. You deserve peace. I'm 59 and just started over. Let's go. Screw the timeline. Get happy now." I read each one slowly, as if I were learning a new language, the language of self-acceptance, of late freedom, of women who finally said enough. Without realizing it, my eyes filled with tears. This was the internet. This strange place where strangers offered more tenderness than the people I'd fed for 40 years. I wiped my eyes with the sleeve of my hotel robe. Who said life couldn't start at 67? Even at 80, I could still drive to Denver and see the snow. I could still learn to scuba dive, paint a desert sunrise. Just breathing meant I was still in the game. I closed my eyes that night with those voices echoing in my head, not the ones that doubted me, but the ones that believed in a woman they'd never met. That woman was me. When I woke up the next morning, the room was quiet. My phone screen lit up, 14 missed calls, all from Rachel. I didn't open a single one. If she wanted Evelyn to be her new mother, she could have her. I tapped over to WeChat. Gerald's name blinked at the top of my pin chats. He'd sent several voice messages. I played the first. His voice cracked like dry paper. Sharp. Furious. Have you lost your damn mind? Embarrassing me in front of Evelyn like that? What do you think that makes me look like? The next message came seconds later. You better be back tomorrow and clean up the mess you made in the dining room. Don't think I'm lifting a finger. I stared at the screen. Then I typed slowly, carefully. See you. County Court next month. Because I had already filed. 28 days left in the cooling off period. And that was all the time left between who I was and who I was becoming. The phone rang again. I answered without checking the screen. Elaine. Gerald's voice exploded through the line. You think you're someone now? You're 67 and playing divorce? Grow up. Fine. Go. Let's see how far you get. Without the Collins name behind you, you're nothing. I let him talk. I smiled to myself. Wry, bitter, clear. He truly believed that what he gave me was freedom, that the door he left open for Evelyn was a gift, not a dog flap, not something you crawl through. I hung up, set the phone face down on the nightstand, and stared at the ceiling, and finally, after all the noise, the fire, the tears, my heart was still quiet, whole, mine. That night I didn't answer a single call. The bedside lamp cast a soft amber glow across the room as I leaned back into the pillows and reached into the drawer beside me. Inside was a small, worn notebook filled with old photographs I'd brought from home, my past pressed between pages. One image caught my eye, me at 20, in a handmade cotton dress, standing next to Gerald on a bright spring morning. We were smiling. I stared at it now, really stared, and saw the truth. I hadn't been happy. That smile was the kind you wear when you want love to land on you like a favor. It was the smile of someone trying to be easy to keep. Back then I thought I was simply too old for dreams, that I'd missed the window, but the truth was much sharper. That marriage hadn't aged me, it had erased me, bit by bit, gesture by gesture, year by year. Not anymore. I looked over at my phone. A headline flashed across the screen. Women over 67 are redefining what it means to start over. I saved it, and then, in that quiet, I made myself a promise. I'm still alive, and from this moment on, I live for me. Just as I was about to turn out the light, a new notification slid across my screen. Gerald had updated his Facebook status. Curious. I tapped. It was a photo, Evelyn in one of Gerald's button-down shirts, wiping the dining room table in my house. She was bent slightly, smiling, looking utterly at home. His caption read, "Some feelings never change. After all these years, I never thought I'd see her again." High school butterflies, 40 years later, they grew roots. I stared at the screen, the words slicing deeper than any argument. He didn't even need to tell me directly. He wanted the world to know he'd replaced me, that he was fine. That this, the woman in my kitchen, in my shirt, in my seat, was love. A moment later, another notification. Rachel's Instagram. Same photo. Her caption, "Guess who just got a new bonus mom?" I let out a cold, humorless laugh. Family vibe. If that was the family she wanted, I wouldn't stop her. The comments were already rolling in. Wait, what happened to his wife? She is that Evelyn Marks from Brighton High? Gerald always lands on his feet. Legend. I locked my phone. In the drawer beside it lay my winning scratch-off ticket, $10,000, folded neatly in a plastic sleeve. I pulled it out and dialed the number printed on the back for the Colorado State Lotto. A cheerful voice answered. "You've got 67 days to complete your claim," she said warmly. I exhaled, slow and deep. I had planned to share it. A college fund for Leo, a down payment for Rachel, a cushion for retirement. But not anymore. Not a cent. They gave me no kindness. I owed them no generosity. The next morning I found a small apartment listed in a quiet neighborhood outside downtown Boulder, owned by a retired couple who were renting out their converted guest unit. It had a tiny balcony, an open kitchen, and light that spilled through the curtains like forgiveness. I signed the lease and moved in that same evening, with nothing but a suitcase and a bag of groceries. It wasn't large, but everything in it, every spoon, every switch, every cabinet, was mine. And for the first time in my life, no one commented on how I folded the dish towels. No one barked from another room asking where their socks were. No one gave me silence as punishment for forgetting to pick up the mail. It was quiet, but the good kind, the kind that feels like the inside of a hug you give yourself. For the first time, everything bore my name: the lease, the cable bill, even the grocery rewards card. I opened YouTube that night and searched for women like me, retired and reborn. I watched one woman film herself driving an RV solo across national parks. Another, 70, hair cropped short and silver, recorded the northern lights from a hilltop in Montana. A third had just returned from scuba diving in Santa Cruz. My heart beat a little fast. "I'm going," I whispered aloud. "I'm going to see those places." But this time, I wouldn't be tagging along for someone else's dream. I wouldn't be carrying the snacks, packing the sunscreen, checking the tickets. This time, the journey would be mine. Then the next wave hit. Gerald and Evelyn had gone viral. The photo Evelyn in his shirt, bending down to wipe my kitchen floor, was now everywhere. TikTok edits, Facebook reposts, even a few local influencers. His caption had traveled far. "Some feelings never fade. After all these years, I thought I'd lost her. Turns out love just needed time." It appeared on a Facebook page called Second Chances Over 60, then on a romantic YouTube compilation set to soft piano music. The comments exploded. "True love wins. She looks amazing. Can't believe she's..." My mom's their age, and still waiting for her love story. "This gives me hope. He found his forever person. Just late." I sat on my couch, in my tiny rental, staring at the phone. Every word felt like a paper cut. Tiny, persistent, real. They had turned my life into lighting and filters, turned her into the heroine. And me, I was just a line in the plot summary. His first wife, his arrangement, the placeholder in a second chance love story. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just sat there watching my life be rewritten by strangers and filters and captions, watching Gerald stir soup beside Evelyn, in what used to be my kitchen, my pots, my spices, my recipe for bean stew, while soft jazz played in the background. The YouTube channel was called Seasoned Soul. Their video lunch with your favorite silver-haired couple. The comments poured in. "She's so gentle, you can tell she really loves him. Grandpa is aging like fine wine. True love gets a second shot and I'm here for it. They're what I hope my parents become." A few voices, hesitant, slipped through the waves of adoration. "Didn't he have a wife and a kid? Is this the same guy who left his grandson's birthday party in a mess? Pretty sure this was someone else's kitchen." But they were drowned out, drowned in pastel hearts and couple goals and fairy tale emojis. I watched their second upload, Cozy Mornings with Evelyn, with a kind of numbness I couldn't quite name. Evelyn wore one of my old scarves. Gerald kissed her cheek like he'd invented affection yesterday. And I was a ghost. A footnote. A cautionary tale they never bothered to tell. I closed my laptop. My hands shook, not with rage but with grief. A strange grief. The kind that comes from knowing you were always the rehearsal, never the show. That night I didn't dream. I simply lay awake, eyes open in the dark, until the birds began chirping outside my window. The next day my phone buzzed again, this time with a video. Rachel. I knew that background, the couch, the photo wall, the frames I hung myself, one by one over the years. She sat with Leo in her lap, her voice syrupy, her tone polished. "My mother has always had a strong personality," she said carefully. That day Leo just wanted to bring her a cup of cocoa, but she reacted. She paused, her gaze softened. He ended up getting pushed. Took a while for the bruise to heal. Leo nodded solemnly. "I don't like Grandma," he said. "She yells and throws plates. Evelyn, Grandma Evelyn, never does that." I felt the world tilt slightly beneath me. I wasn't angry, I was gutted. None of them had been there. Not truly. None of them had seen who threw the mug, who burned, who cried alone on the hospital table. But in 2 edited sentences and 1 staged nod, They turned me from a grandmother into a monster. I watched the comments pour in. She's emotionally abusive. You can see it. Poor kid. That woman should be ashamed. No wonder Gerald left. I closed the app. Sat there. Hands clenched. Then something in me rose. Not rage. Resolve. I opened YouTube again. Scanned videos titled Content Strategy 101 and going viral. Over 6. I didn't need a ring light. I didn't need a jingle. I just needed to speak. I tapped record. The lighting was dim. The camera angle imperfect. My voice trembled, but I made sure it was clear. Hi, I began. I'm Gerald's ex-wife, Leo's biological grandmother. I just want to say not everything you're seeing is the full truth. I posted it. For 20 minutes, nothing. Then one comment. Then 5. Then 50. A private message pinged in my inbox from a user called A Truth Matters 58. Ma'am, I saw your video, but no one's going to find it unless you use the right keywords. Trust me. Attached was a screenshot, a suggested title, hashtags, phrasing. I followed it, changed the title to Gerald Collins. You're playing the hero. Maybe file the divorce first. I uploaded a photo of my medical report. Then, a quiet voiceover. Yes, I overreacted when the hot chocolate hit me, but after 30 years of being silent, of serving, shrinking, scraping, who wouldn't break once? I added hashtags, names, the town, the show. 10 minutes later, 12,000 views, then 80,000, then the local trending list. The comment section exploded. Wait, they're not even divorced yet. She posted her hospital record. She's not lying. How is this woman the villain? This is what happens when wives are erased in their own homes. Of course, some critics stayed. She admitted to pushing the kid. Why are we defending her? Still sounds unstable to me. I didn't reply. I uploaded a second video instead, this one under a soft floor lamp. My eyes steady. I did push him. And if I could go back, I'd control myself better. But if you think I'm controlling, maybe ask who's been managing fevers, laundry and dinner for $6 on $10 budgets for 30 years. Who do you think earned that grocery money? Gerald? Please. I even posted the stall number of the market where the footage of me arguing years ago had been filmed. You wanted receipts? I said. I kept all of them. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. Gerald. His second call since I'd filed the papers. I let it ring twice, then answered. His voice came in hot and livid. Elaine, take the damn video down. Do you have any idea what you've started? I held the phone a few inches from my ear, then said simply, everything I said was true. And in 4 days the court will make it official. We'll be done. I hung up. No hesitation. No apology. I didn't check the comments again. I didn't need to. I'd said what I came to say. And for the first time in my life, the world heard me. The comments didn't stop. Not for hours. Not for days. People dug up everything. Clips from the show, screenshots from Evelyn's now locked Instagram, photos from Gerald's old posts. One commenter even found the original wedding announcement from the local paper, 40 years ago. My name still printed beside his like a signature I'd long since stopped recognizing as mine. They weren't just defending me now. They were furious for me. He's living in her house, using her kitchen and calling it a new beginning. This woman gave them everything, and they made her a villain for walking away. Evelyn should be ashamed. She showed up with a funeral veil and unpacked a throne. The tide was shifting. Even Rachel wasn't immune. Her brand started to crack. Collaborations fell through. Sponsored content disappeared. Her comment sections turned cold. A few days later, a notification popped up on my screen. Silence, retreat, collapse. Then came the call I knew would eventually come. Evelyn. I stared at her name on my screen, blinking steadily. My finger hovered over decline. But then, curiosity won. Elaine, she said, in that soft, sugar-dipped voice she'd perfected since 7th grade. I know I may have done some things wrong too. I don't want to make excuses, but could you maybe consider taking the video down? There it was. That fragile tone. That delicate suggestion. The way she always knew how to cry without tears. I remembered that look from school. The time she lost an eraser and didn't accuse me. Just stared at me until I handed mine over, even though it wasn't hers. She didn't need to prove anything, just gather an audience. And now, years later, the scene hadn't changed. Just the stage. I smiled softly, almost kindly. The video stays, Evelyn, I said. You chose your part. Now live with the reviews. I ended the call before she could respond. 2 days later, she deleted all her accounts. Gerald stopped uploading. The fairy tale cracked, quietly, without fanfare. Then, at last, the date arrived. Divorce judgment signing. County court. I wore a simple navy coat, hair pinned back neatly. When I arrived in the courthouse lobby, Gerald was already there, Evelyn clinging tightly to his arm like a prize he'd won at a fair. He looked up when he saw me and scoffed. You really think life gets better without me? He said with a sneer. If you ever come crawling back, you're not getting in. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I just raised a brow. Relax, I said coolly. I don't recycle. The clerk called our name. We entered the small office. Sat on opposite sides of the desk. No lawyers. Just us. Just forms. Gerald's signature looked practiced. Habitual. I signed mine slow and firm. The court official looked up after we finished. A formal decree will be mailed to both of you next week, she said. Once received, your civil status will be officially updated. We nodded. That was it. The string, 40 years long, frayed and abused, finally cut. Outside, I caught a glimpse of Evelyn and Gerald standing near the exit. She whispered something, nervous, and he replied just loud enough for me to hear. How soon will we get the paperwork? Should we start scheduling our marriage license? He patted her hand gently. Soon. Just a little longer, babe. Then it'll be official. I walked past them without stopping, but right at the exit I paused, turned and tossed the line over my shoulder like a stone skipping across glass. No rush, I said. You'll get my old job soon enough. Evelyn paled. Gerald didn't look so smug anymore. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Maybe it was the setting. Maybe she just hadn't expected me to be calm. Gerald muttered under his breath. Ignore her. She's always been dramatic. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I walked out into the sunlight, where no one was waiting to lecture me, where no one was tugging on my sleeve or handing me a dirty plate, where no one called me dramatic for daring to speak. On the way home, I passed a park where kids played by a fountain. A woman with silver hair sat under a tree sketching something with charcoal. I caught a glimpse. A bird in flight, the wings open wide. That night, I opened my laptop. A comment on my last video caught my eye. She's starting over at this age. I admire the hell out of her. I smiled, really smiled, and whispered aloud to no one but the room. So do I. The next morning, I booked a train ticket to Boulder, where the Colorado State Lotto office was located. I rode by the window watching bridges and rivers flicker past like old memories shaking loose. The world was bigger than I remembered. Wider. Filled with color I hadn't let myself see in decades. The sky was a richer blue. The people on the sidewalks moved like they had somewhere important to be. For a moment I felt small, but not invisible. Not anymore. At the lottery claim center, I filled out the forms, signed the documents, and sat through a quick tax briefing. Then came the moment, a real check in my name. 5 figures that didn't belong to a family fund or a retirement plan or a college account. Just me. A local news station had picked up the story. A cheerful reporter asked if I'd like to say anything for the segment. I stood under the bright camera lights and said calmly, I'd like to donate a portion of the winnings to a women's shelter. There are still so many women in this city who feel trapped like I once did. I want them to know there is a way out. Right then and there, I wrote a check for $100,000 to the Phoenix Women's Alliance. The segment aired that evening, and within hours my new social account flooded with messages. This woman is the real winner. Divorced. Won the lottery. Donated. Icon. Please start a podcast. I need to hear your story. God, I love her. Grandma goals. Drop the coat link and hair color routine, please. They were right. I wasn't done. In fact, I was just beginning. The next thing I did was make a hair appointment. A real one. Not the usual box dye I'd used for years in the kitchen sink. Rinsing quickly so Gerald wouldn't say you smell like a salon, like it was something to be ashamed of. No, this time I walked into a sleek downtown studio with floor-to-ceiling windows and walls, the color of clean slate. My stylist, Carla, was a silver-haired Latina in her 50s with bold red nails and an infectious laugh. She ran her fingers through my salt and pepper strands and grinned. "You ready for something new?" I met her gaze in the mirror and nodded. "Ash brown," I said, with shines. "I want to look like a woman walking into her next life." She chuckled, warm and knowing. Say no more. Before, I never would have dared. I hadn't bought a piece of clothing over $50 in years. Anytime I did, Gerald's voice would echo in my ear. "At your age, what are you trying to prove with all that color?" That afternoon, I walked out of the salon and straight into the Burberry boutique next door. The saleswoman greeted me with a gentle smile, no judgment in her eye. I ran my fingers across the smooth fabric of a camel-colored trench coat. It was soft and warm, and beautiful, and 5 times more expensive than anything I'd ever allowed myself to own. "Is this your first?" she asked, folding it neatly into a bag. I smiled back. "It's the first time I've bought something just for me." The coat cost $5, and every penny was a thank you to the woman who had finally blessedly chosen herself. In the weeks that followed, it was as if life finally cracked open for me. I learned to take the subway. I memorized Amtrak schedules. Before my first flight, I spent hours studying terminal maps online, terrified I'd board the wrong plane or slow the line. But I was overthinking, as always. At the gate, a young airline worker looked up and her face lit with recognition. "Oh my God," she whispered. "I saw your video. I hope you're really living your best life now." And for once, I didn't shrink. I smiled, warm and steady, because yes, I was. I started traveling. Places I'd only ever seen in photos or travel shows or the desktop wallpaper of someone else's computer. The hot springs in Glacier National Park steaming like the earth was exhaling. The northern lights in Montana, streaking across the sky like a private ballet. The ocean breeze in Santa Cruz salty and wild, kissing my skin with every gust. At 67 I wasn't late. I was exactly on time. I started a small Instagram account, not for fame, just for me. I posted photos from the road. A cappuccino in a stone mug on a patio in Santa Fe. A book beside a lake in Idaho. My reflection in a window, half lit by morning. Each caption a kind of vow, reclaiming joy, frame by frame. Freedom doesn't come in noise. It comes in stillness. I am not what I left behind. I am what I choose to walk toward. After months of roaming, I settled into a modest 2-bedroom cottage in a lakeside town where the air always smelled of pine and the sun melted into the water each evening, like a soft goodbye. The kitchen was bright and open. The windows framed every sunset, and the balcony bloomed with pots of lavender. I adopted a stray cat, gray and white, with one torn ear and a missing patch of fur on his back. I named him Charlie. Charlie didn't ask for affection. He lounged in patches of light and knocked pens off counters like it was his part-time job. But every night, without fail, he curled up by the front door and slept there, quiet and loyal. Like he knew some hearts take a long time to feel safe again. In town, I volunteered at the food pantry and signed up to deliver groceries to elderly residents. On weekends, I baked lemon bars and apple pies for church events. Even though I never stayed long, people started calling me our Elaine. Not Mom, not Grandma, not Gerald's wife. Just me. Ours. For the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to be needed without being used. One afternoon, Rachel called. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail. Her voice was sweet, but sharp at the edges, like honey dripped over a blade. "Mom," she said, "we just found out about the lottery. Why didn't you tell us? That donation alone could have paid for a house in the city. Or Leo's college." I smiled, cool and quiet. "Oh, Rachel." In the background I heard Leo's voice, piping up with curiosity. "Grandma? I miss you. When are you coming home?" I chuckled under my breath, setting down my cup of crawfish soup. "You've got a new grandma now," I whispered. "Don't mix them up." The phone rang again. This time I answered. "Mom, come on," Rachel's voice hissed. "You're You shouldn't be playing internet games. That money should be for Leo and for you when you're older. I took a slow sip of my beer, watching Charlie stretch in a ray of sun. It's funny, I said. Every time one of you calls, I lose my appetite. A pause. Then I added, don't worry. When I die, you won't have to fight over anything. I've already written my will. Every cent goes to women like me. Women no one thinks are allowed to start over. Then I hung up and blocked her number. After I blocked Rachel, I sat back on the couch and looked around my little cottage. Everything, every piece of it, had my name on it. The utility bills, the books on the shelf, the tea towels, the spare keys hanging on the hook near the door. Nothing was borrowed. Nothing was taken. No one could pull the rug out from under me because this time, I'd laid the rug down myself. Sometimes out of idle curiosity, I'd scroll through Rachel's public posts. It felt less like spying and more like peeking into a sitcom rerun, one where the laugh track was a little too loud, the lines too rehearsed. The internet had a name for people like her now. Digital pets. People who didn't make a sound unless someone clicked them. That's what she'd become. Click to activate. Cute until questioned. And Gerald? Their channel-seasoned souls had gone silent. No new uploads. No more soup-stirring montages or porch-swing love stories. Then, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, I read a thread on a local forum that confirmed what I'd suspected. Evelyn had moved back in with her sister across the state. Gerald was showing up alone at events. His smile a little thinner, his hair no longer slicked back. No official breakup post. No long goodbye. Just silence, like a curtain closing on a play that ran out of budget. Weeks passed, then of course he called. The name on my screen glowed like a warning flare. Gerald Collins. I stared at it, took a sip of tea, then picked up, just to see what performance he'd rehearsed. Elaine, he said in a voice trying very hard to sound casual. How've you been? I looked over at Charlie, stretched out on the window ledge, tail flicking lazily. You looking to film a sequel? I asked. There was a pause. Then came the line I'd bet my last dollar he'd use. I just thought, maybe there's still a chance for us. I smiled so wide I could feel it behind my eyes. Oh, sorry, I said sweetly. I'm in Alaska right now watching the northern lights. Signal's not great. Then I hung up and blocked him too. Because even digital pets eventually become obsolete, and I had no interest in feeding strays anymore. I didn't need anyone's permission to exist. Not Gerald's, not Rachel's, not Evelyn. I didn't need a kitchen to prove I was valuable or a title to make me real. I had Charlie guarding the front door. My neighbors dropped off muffins when they had too many. I baked them apple pies in return. I woke when I wanted, slept when I pleased. I didn't answer questions I didn't feel like answering, and for once, my voice was mine. The best part? The silence felt like home, not punishment. One morning, just after sunrise, I stood on the back balcony watching the light pour over the lake like honey. I was sipping coffee when I saw a woman, maybe in her 70s, riding a bike down the gravel path, white hair loose and wild behind her. She waved as she passed. I waved back, and I thought, This is the life I was supposed to be living all along. A few days later, Rachel tried again. A new number. A text this time. Mom, Evelyn's gone. Dad's been a mess. Leo asks about you every day. Maybe we could talk. I stared at the message, read it twice, then a third time. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, pulled out a notebook, and flipped to a fresh page. Across the top, I wrote, what I know now. Then I began to write. That starting over isn't about revenge. It's about return. Returning to yourself. To the you who got buried under diapers and dinner and everyone else's needs. That love doesn't have to mean being useful. That being left behind doesn't mean you were unworthy. Sometimes it means you finally made space for better. That silence can be peace. That you're never too old to be someone's new beginning, even if that someone is you. And finally, that if anyone tries to put you back in the kitchen and tell you to be quiet, burn the recipe, and serve them nothing. I finished the list and set the notebook down. The ink still wet, the air in the room calm and light. I felt like I had emptied something from my chest, not a burden, exactly, but the residue of one. A final exhale, after a lifetime of holding in everything that needed to be said. That afternoon, I walked into the community center 2 blocks from my cottage and pinned a note to the corkboard beside the front desk, writing circle forming, for women starting over. Age 50 plus, no judgment, no rules. Just stories. Just us. The first meeting, 3 women showed up. The second? 11. By the 5th week, we had to move to a bigger room. They came with walkers, with notebooks, with grief in their hands, and freedom in their eyes. Some had just lost their husbands. Others had just lost themselves. Some were angry. Some were tired. All were ready. We read poems. We wrote stories. We laughed more than we cried. One woman, Ethel, brought in her divorce decree and read it aloud like a eulogy. Then we toasted it with lemonade and store-bought cookies. We cheered like it was a graduation. Because it was. I began writing every day again. Not just posts, not just comments, but long, sprawling pieces about everything I had once swallowed. I wrote about the days I'd made dinner for 6 on a single bag of beans and a rotisserie chicken. I wrote about the nights I sat awake beside a child with a fever while Gerald snored in another room. I wrote about folding sheets in silence, dreaming of volcanoes in Iceland. And people started reading. A blog turned into a following. A following turned into requests for interviews. And before I knew it, a small publishing house emailed me with an offer. We think your story could help a lot of women. Would you consider expanding these essays into a book? I stared at the screen, heart beating too fast. I called the editor back the next day. And I said, a year later, what I know now hit shelves. It wasn't a bestseller. It didn't trend on TikTok. But it showed up in libraries, in church basements, in care homes, in hospitals, in hands. Women wrote me letters. You put into words what I never had the courage to say out loud. You reminded me I'm not invisible. I left him after 38 years. Thank you. I kept every single one. They live in a shoebox under my bed, not for legacy, not for glory, but for those late nights when doubt creeps in, wearing old clothes and familiar voices. When it says, maybe it wasn't that bad, I open that box and remember, yes, it was. But now, it isn't. One spring day, I stood at the edge of the lake behind my cottage, wind brushing my face, my coat tucked snug around me. Charlie wove between my ankles like a shadow with a heartbeat. Across the water, 2 ducks paddled in silence. No one was shouting from inside the house. No one needed dinner by 6. No one would call me selfish for taking a walk. I watched the sky shift from pale blue to blush pink. The lavender on the balcony danced in the breeze. The air smelled like rain and renewal, and I realized I wasn't rebuilding the life I lost. I was building the one I should have had all along. A few weeks later, an email arrived from the producers of Silver Sparks, the feel-good TV show that once featured Gerald and Evelyn, back when they were parading their second-chance romance in soft focus. Subject line read, "We'd love to invite you on for a follow-up, Life After Letting Go." I didn't hesitate. I clicked reply and typed, "Thank you, but no. I'm not someone's aftermath. I'm the main story." Then I closed my laptop and went outside to plant marigold. One morning not long after, I passed through the town square on my way to the bakery. On the bulletin board outside the cafe was a new flyer, Community Potluck. All generations welcome. Bring a dish. Bring a story. I stood there for a second, eyes resting on the words bring a story. Then I smiled. I didn't rush. I didn't hurry back to the kitchen. I didn't overthink what I'd make. I knew exactly what to bring. That weekend, I arrived with a peach cobbler in a ceramic dish, wearing my ash-brown hair in soft waves, my Burberry coat open, and a lightness in my chest that couldn't be measured by any recipe. I didn't need a family table to feel seen. I didn't need applause to feel valuable. I didn't need permission to be real. Someone handed me a plate. Someone else asked me to share the cobbler recipe. A little girl with tangled curls tugged at my sleeve and asked if I was the woman from the book with the bird on the cover. I smiled. I guess I am. And then when they asked me if I had anything I wanted to say to introduce myself, maybe I cleared my throat, stepped forward and said simply, "My name is Elaine." And I started over at 67. The applause that followed wasn't loud, it wasn't forced or polite or filled with obligation. It was warm, real. The kind of clapping that says, "We see you." And for once in my life, I felt seen without having to serve, fix, or beg for it. I took my seat with the others, the cobbler dish still warm in my hands, and listened as people told stories, some funny, some sad, all of them threaded with truth. A young woman spoke about quitting a job that drained her spirit. An older man described adopting a dog after losing his wife. A teenage girl read a poem she'd written in secret about not knowing where she belonged, and then it was just a group of strangers, passing plates and refilling glasses, and laughing without anyone performing. No one asked me to smile harder. No one scolded me for speaking. No one whispered that my place was back in the kitchen. That night I walked home under a velvet sky, stars beginning to blink awake above the lake. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes, Charlie padding softly behind me like a tiny furry bodyguard. Back in the cottage, I peeled off my coat, set down the empty dish, and turned on the kettle. Steam curled upward as I settled into my chair by the window, journal open on my lap. There were no cameras, no trending tags, no staged confessions or viral captions, just quiet. I thought of Gerald and Evelyn, how they'd tried to make their story the only one, how they'd poured so much energy into being adored that they forgot what it meant to be true. I wondered if he ever sat alone in a silent room and realized what he'd really lost. Not a servant, not a placeholder, but a woman who had loved him even when he didn't deserve it. And I smiled, because I no longer needed that to mean something. I no longer needed him to mean something. He could spend the rest of his life rewriting the narrative. My name omitted, my role reduced, but it wouldn't change the truth. I chose myself, and I did it without asking for applause. I looked out the window and whispered the phrase that had carried me, sustained me, transformed me. "You're not too old. You're just on time." It became my prayer, my anchor, my anthem, and I shared it with every woman who sat beside me at the writing circle, with every neighbor who helped carry groceries, with every stranger online who messaged me after reading my story. Because in the end, it wasn't about revenge, or spectacle, or teaching anyone a lesson. It was about freedom, about finally coming home to myself. Weeks turned into months. Seasons changed. I traveled to places that once lived only on postcards and Pinterest boards. The red rocks of Arizona, the snowy silence of Vermont, the moody cliffs of the Oregon coast. I didn't pack heavy, just enough. A few outfits, my journal, a worn-out paperback, and I always came back to the cottage, to Charlie's quiet pause and the smell of lavender by the door, to a kitchen where no one barked orders, to a life stitched together by my own hand. One morning I checked the mail and found a letter with no return address. The handwriting was messy, hesitant. Inside a single line, "I didn't know how to love you then, but I hope you learned how to love yourself." I didn't need a signature. I tore it in half, not out of anger, but because I didn't need closure. I'd already closed the door. Softly, finally, beautifully. That night, I opened a fresh notebook. On the first page I wrote, "Aging isn't fading, it's blooming, finally untamed." I didn't write for anyone else. Not this time, just for me. Cast to you. On my 70th birthday, the writing group threw a surprise potluck. They filled the town hall with candles and twinkly lights, each person bringing a dish from a chapter I'd written about. There was slow-cooked stew, lemon tarts, homemade bread, even a layered cake with frosting that said, "To Elaine, the main character." I laughed so hard I cried. When they handed me the microphone, I didn't give a speech. I simply said, "I thought my life was over. I thought I'd wasted my best years. But now I know the truth. The best years are the ones you claim for yourself." And the room clapped, not for the woman I used to be, but for the one who walked out that door and never looked back. So here I am, 3 years free, and fully mine. I don't have a kitchen full of people waiting to eat. I don't have a husband to impress or a daughter to apologize to, but I have peace. I have late mornings and long walks, and friends who bring me peaches from their garden just because. I have a cat who doesn't need me to smile to know I'm okay. I have a story, one they didn't get to write. And if anyone asks me what I'd tell my younger self, standing over a sink filled with dirty dishes, heart filled with silence, I'd tell her this: start over. Start loud. Start now. Because freedom isn't given, it's chosen. And I would place my hand gently on hers and whisper, "You were never late. You were just waiting for your turn." This story is a powerful reminder that it's never too late to reclaim your voice, your peace, and your life. No matter your age or what you've endured, you can start over, and not just survive, but truly thrive. If this journey moved you, please like, subscribe, and support this channel, so more stories like this can be heard. Every view, every comment helps bring visibility to voices that have too often been silenced. And we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your region or country in the comments so we can see how far this message is reaching.